Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is one of the Democratic Party's biggest stars. When she was first elected in 2018, she was very much an outsider, a social media phenomenon, often a critic of her party's programs and leaders. Now she's seen as more of an insider, a somewhat more senior figure, still a big star. And so we brought her here to Studio One to ask what she thinks her party can do with its current dilemma. Democrats are out of power in Washington. They're watching President Trump enact his agenda, and they know the president has great appeal with a large part of their traditional base, the working class, people Ocasio-Cortez would feel that she would like to represent. Here's some of our conversation. And I want to begin with how you see your party as an opposition party at the moment. Mm-hmm. If you had to pick one word, what is a word that describes the state of your party right now?
I think a word to describe the state of the party is resolved. If I had to pick one word, it would be resolved.
It's not shocked or dismayed or anything like that at this moment?
On
the defensive?
Moment, I think we've moved through shock. I think we've moved through dismay. I think we've moved through the 5 stages of grief. I think we've moved through that defensiveness. But it is, I think, a rapidly evolving situation. And I would say this week, especially in the light of last night's budget vote, the moment right now today is resolve.
We're talking here on a Wednesday, the night before there was this budget vote. Every single Democrat voted no. Mm-hmm. Do you consider that an accomplishment, that your party was united, even if it was united in a no?
Yes. Of course, if we were not united in yesterday's vote, I think we would be in far, far, far deeper trouble. But the fact that there is this much unity is important. It is, I think, a baseline prerequisite for the moment to come and the fight over Medicaid, Medicare, and frankly, huge swaths of the American economy.
Do you assume that Republicans are going to give you the issues that are going to allow you to come back?
I do not make that assumption. I do not believe that elections are given. I don't think of them. I know many people think of them as natural pendulum swings, and I completely understand why that is. But I believe that in order for us to not just win a majority, but to win decisive majorities that allow us to govern, we need to be as strategic and tactical as possible. But I do believe that the Republican Party is making certain large errors right now, and that they are underestimating the public.
What are the errors?
I think that issuing a mandate to the Energy and Commerce Committee to cut $880 billion specifically, they are creating certain very specific numerical mandates in the budget cuts, and they're demanding them from very specific areas that make it nearly impossible for them to keep their promises.
$880 billion is the cut over 10 years from Medicaid, if I'm not mistaken.
From the Energy and Commerce Committee, whose jurisdiction is overwhelmingly Medicaid and Medicare, correct?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you think that is a mistake that will come back to them? Why?
President Trump has gone on the record saying we're not going to touch Medicaid. The Republican Party is saying over and over again, we are not going to cut Medicaid. We are not going to touch Medicare. And they cannot consistently hold both the $880 billion cut promise and not touching Medicaid.
Mike Johnson, the House Speaker, said just this week, come on, there's waste, fraud, and abuse. We're going to cut it out without affecting anybody's benefits. You don't believe that?
Sure. I think you can cut a bit here and there, but it does not add to $880 billion. Just last night, Republicans were saying kind of the highest water number that they could find was $50 billion. And that is if you cast the widest net and adopt all of their definitions of what waste is, what abuse is, long-term care, children's health insurance. That's still $50 billion. And they're talking about $880 billion. The math in what they are offering as waste does not square with the price tag and the mandate that they've been given.
So what happens at the other end? Ordinary people don't lose health care, I guess, but what happens, do you believe, if that cut actually becomes reality, which is another question as to whether it ever happens?
Yeah, well, if that cut becomes reality, it's important for people to understand not just are people going to be thrown off of Medicaid, not only are Medicare recipients who receive, for example, long-term care benefits from Medicaid going to be affected, but people who are not on Medicaid are likely going to see their health insurance premiums go up, because the more people get kicked off of Medicaid, the more uninsured people there are in the United States, the more they use ERs, the more that they go directly to hospitals for care, and the cost of uninsured people is oftentimes then borne in health insurance premiums as well, and deductibles.
The erosion of Democratic Party support among working class voters has been pretty well documented. It seems to cross racial and other lines. It's real, and Democrats have talked a lot about what they maybe did wrong in the way that they spoke or the way they approached people or the way that they acted. But I want to flip that around a little bit. What do you think President Trump has done right that has appealed to traditional Democratic constituencies?
I think that some of his campaign promises, he does a good job of pairing what I would say some of the largest giveaways to the 1% and elites with very tangible policy promises.
No tax on tips.
Exactly. You take no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. These things sound great. They also directly appeal to very specific pockets of people who tend to be working class. And that creates a permission structure, right? You toss a crumb to us and you give the farm to the big fish. And I think he's very sophisticated in how he tailors those things together.
Some of those promises are things that Democrats themselves would like, capping interest rates on credit cards, to give one example. Has there been some discussion among Democrats that, I mean, you're almost a little envious? He's gotten ahead of you on some of these issues.
Well, the credit card interest rate cap is my bill from 2019 with Senator Sanders. And we're having some bipartisan momentum on it. Senator Hawley is interested in working with Senator Sanders and myself. I've also have been working with some Republican colleagues. But it is a signal that Republicans understand the trouble that they are in trying to pursue their own agenda in a very naked form. They need certain fig leaves, and they are sophisticated about that. But I think what people are seeing now is that increasingly they feel lied to, right? That these were campaign promises. Maybe they'll pass, maybe they don't, maybe they won't. But there is, I think, a slingshot effect that's happening right now when people are seeing the mass layoffs in the federal workforce, the cutoffs in life-saving research, the real discussions from Elon Musk calling Medicaid recipients and people who receive SNAP and other food assistance a parasite class. And I think people are realizing that the fig leaf was the fig leaf, and it wasn't actually, what's on the box wasn't what's inside.
You think the president has changed the subject effectively since he was elected?
I don't think he's changed the subject. I think he is who he's always been. But I think certainly some people feel that way.
I think of another aspect of this, though. Dean Phillips, one of your fellow Democratic members, was on television this past week, Fox News, as a matter of fact, and he appeared to wish Democrats acted a little more like Trump in this way. He wished that they would appeal to business people, to get smart people into government, to talk about efficiency. He seemed to wish Democrats would do what Elon Musk is doing, even if he doesn't agree with the way that Elon Musk is doing it.
I would say that instead of appealing to other politicians, we should be appealing to the American people. And if you ask the American people what they think of what Elon Musk and Doge are doing with government right now, they are vehemently opposed. The reactions right now are not just in Democratic districts, they're in Republican districts. Even Republicans in my district, they're saying, I voted for Trump. I did not vote for Elon Musk. I did not vote for this. I did not vote for mass buyouts of the federal workforce. We did not vote for the corruption of gutting NASA and then having the contracts go to SpaceX. We did not vote for Starlink to start replacing critical FAA operations.
Which is the thing that's in the news. It's being discussed. Okay.
Yes, and I think that there is a very, very deep corruption at the core of this. If Elon Musk wanted to divest himself of his businesses and enter public service with his so-called business expertise, that is his prerogative. But so long as he maintains a vested financial interest in gutting the federal government, he is acting in his own self-interest and not those of the American people.
I want to underline who we're talking about here, who you think is concerned about this. There are blue state voters who voted for Donald Trump. New York was more for Trump this time than in past elections. Your district was more for Trump than in past elections. And you've had social media discussions with people who voted both for you and for Donald Trump. Do you truly believe, though, that that class of voters is paying attention and cares about the details of what you see as corruption and exactly the way that Musk is going about what he's doing for Trump?
Oh, yeah. I'm hearing it. I'm seeing it. And I represent a district that is very working class. And by that, I mean that I engage in a tremendous amount of constituent services. This is not the kind of district that is where town halls are typically filled to the absolute brim. People are working 2 jobs. They're doing these kinds of things. I am getting emails. I am getting phone calls. I had a telephone town hall last week that had really high numbers of attendance of people. And we ask, out of all of these attacks on immigration, the assault on Medicaid, the budget conversation, and Musk's access to government, which is the thing you are most concerned about? And overwhelmingly, even I'm surprised, overwhelmingly, the answer is they are concerned about this incursion in what they see as corruption into the federal government.
To what extent is immigration as an issue part of your problem with working class voters?
I mean, I guess my question would be what does the word problem mean?
People voting for the other side and not for you.
Yeah.
Feeling that Democrats are not serious about the issue in ways that concern them.
I think that we have a problem on immigration because of the lack of progress that we've had on this issue. And as we know, Republicans weaponize that lack of progress. Of course, there was famously a bipartisan bill last year that the Republican majority in the Senate and also in the House were willing to pass. President Biden was willing to work with them on it. And Donald Trump said, do not solve this problem. As long as it is broken, then it will be politically beneficial for us. And so it is a problem not just for Democrats. It's a problem for the entire country that Republicans do not want to solve any sort of issue with immigration. They are completely uninterested in addressing undocumented people, in addressing a path to citizenship.
Well, they do want to address undocumented people by removing them. I mean, that's what the president is attempting now.
Even then, you see what Republicans did with the Lake and Riley Act recently in their passage with it, in that they authorized the complete gutting of due process. So now you can take a DACA recipient, a dreamer, just accuse them of a crime.
And deport them.
And however, they also understand that they don't even have the infrastructure to do that. So they're actually creating it's not even about creating a deportation pipeline. They are creating a private prison camp pipeline. So they're still creating pipelines to just increase this problem here in the United States.
Why do you think this issue did seem to be a political loser for Democrats among key groups and key constituencies, if what you say is true?
I think that a lack of a path to citizenship in the United States, the lack of addressing comprehensive immigration reform creates a large population of undocumented people in the United States. And that is allowed to be weaponized in many ways. We have a large population of undocumented people in the United States. Overwhelmingly, it is not because they crossed the southern border of the United States. It's because they came here in a documented fashion and overstayed a visa and became undocumented. And it is the lack of ability for us to expand paths to citizenship, modernize paths to citizenship over decades that create this bubbling issue that Republicans are allowed to weaponize.
And you have voters in places like Arizona, which is a swing state that Democrats lost, or Colorado, which is generally a blue state, saying there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of lawlessness.
Yes.
I don't know what to do here. Who's looking out after me?
And I think when that is paired with divestment from the social safety net, when that is paired with lack of progress on minimum wage, when that is paired with rising costs of living, it sets the stage for a strong man to point to any marginalized group and say it's their fault, instead of looking at the gross income inequality that we have and its actual causes in the United States. And so that, I think, is the quandary that Republicans find themselves in, because even on the debate stage, you had Vice President Vance and others trying to say that undocumented people are why we have a housing crisis in this country. And they can fulfill their entire agenda. You will never deport your way into more affordable rent. You're never going to deport your way into being able to make your mortgage meet or make your groceries more affordable. In fact, mass deportations may only make those things much more expensive, actually. And in my view, people voted to lower their groceries. People voted to try to make their lives affordable. And right now, the Trump administration is already running into roadblocks into fulfilling that promise. And they are in trouble. And that's an issue they're going to have to contend with.
You had a recent dispute, if that's the right word, with Tom Homan, the president's Homeland Security czar, so-called. You held an online forum, a Know Your Rights forum, that he didn't like. What were you doing? What was your goal as you saw it?
My job is to educate and act as a liaison of critical information to my constituents. And I was informing all of my constituents of their constitutional protections, and in particular, their constitutional protections against illegal search and seizure in the United States.
Homan was upset, I suppose, because he felt that you were giving advice to people who were here illegally. Were you?
I was giving advice to all of my constituents. Yeah.
He said he was going to report you, or even that he did reach out to the Department of Justice. Have you heard from the Department of Justice?
I have not, and I intend on reaching out to the Department of Justice to inquire.
Really? What would your question be for the Department of Justice?
Well, there is a member of the Trump administration who is threatening and seeks to open an inquiry, and are you going to do it?
What would you learn? What do you hope to learn from that exchange?
I think it's important to know where this administration stands and if they intend on using political intimidation to silence their critics.
The interim U.S. attorney here in Washington, D.C., where we are, Ed Martin, has several times said he has reached out to specific Democratic lawmakers, such as Chuck Schumer, the Senate Democratic leader, to ask for clarification about various remarks that he regarded as threatening. I'm interested if you or your fellow Democrats are at all feeling intimidated or silenced or anything.
I'm not. I think it's important to call this administration's bluff. I think that this is what authoritarians do. I think this is what kleptocracies do. I believe that this is what corrupt administrations do. They rely on the illusion of power, on the suggestion of coercion in order to try to get people to comply in advance. And I think that one of our largest responsibilities is to not comply in advance. If they want to do these things, they can go ahead and do them and let the American people see what they intend to do.
Do you think there is a real risk of lawmakers being investigated, charged, arrested?
Potentially. I mean, we see that this administration is certainly wielding that threat, and we will have to see if they intend on carrying out their threats. If they are to be believed for what they are publicly suggesting, then the answer would be yes. But we will only find out if we call their bluff.
Do you think other Democrats are watching their words?
I think it's certainly possible, but I'm not sure. I mean, I cannot think of or point to any individuals who have said that. I do think that there are Democratic members of Congress who are preparing for that possibility.
How do they prepare?
I think they look to the possibility of litigation. I think they're saying, you know, do we have the best teams possible in order to carry out our work?
Some Republican, or many perhaps, will be watching this, listening to this, and thinking, wait a minute, actually, you're the ones who are prosecuting us. You are the guys who are weaponizing the Justice Department. How would you respond to somebody who may be thinking that?
In what way? In what way? Is the very presence
Putting
of
Trump on trial would be their example, I suppose.
Yes. I mean, here's the deal. In the United States, there is a jury where we are judged by our peers, and he was found guilty in court on 34 felony charges. If people want to say it was weaponized, I mean, it is hard-pressed to say that there's a partisan argument for that. You have Senator Menendez, famously.
Democratic senator from New Jersey. Convicted, yeah.
And to 11 years in prison, I believe. You know, we see over and over again that there has historically been an independent Justice Department whose job it is to be separate and apart from the presidency and the executive branch. Just because someone was held to an equal standard of the law does not mean that the Justice Department was weaponized. However, what is weaponization is that same previously independent Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's Office now turning around saying, we are not the American people's lawyers anymore. We are the president's lawyers. And that is a dramatic shift. That is a dramatic change in the structure of our justice system.
It seems clear you would want to make a case then that this is a corrupt administration that's abusing power. Does the Democratic Party have some challenge in making that case, though, because of certain things that go on in the Democratic Party, or even in your state of New York, or your city of New York, where your mayor is Eric Adams?
Yeah.
Who was indicted until recently, just for starters.
Well, you know, I think it is important that we be not hypocritical in that. I've called for Mayor Eric Adams, to resign or be removed if he refuses to do so. And this is what equal treatment in the eyes of the law means. It's that if you are a Democrat, if you are a Republican, we should both be held to the same standards. It's not even about the absence of corruption. It's the willingness to take corruption to account, to hold it to account, independent of one's party affiliation. And in Mayor Adams's case, what I think is transpiring is that, and again, what we saw coming out of the Southern District of New York, also in recent resignations and the letters that were made public, is that there was a pretty explicit quid pro quo arrangement that these attorneys saw in Mayor Adams approaching the Trump administration, saying, "Hey, you let me off the hook, and I will exchange public policy implementation," which is just as damning not only for Eric Adams, it's also equally damning in terms of corruption of the Trump administration.
Is there another problem Democrats face because you would like government to work? And there's a broad perception, including among many liberals and progressives, that government doesn't work very well. It takes forever to build something in this country, to give a very obvious example. We do have a couple million federal workers, and a lot of people aren't sure how those people really touch their lives or do anything for them. Do you think government really isn't working well enough?
I think it's not just, it is about our society writ large is completely slanted so that the gains that we have go to the wealthy, go to the corporate class, go to the largest corporations in America who pay the least in taxes, and everyday working people who pay much higher percentages of their income in taxes, seeing the least benefit in society. And that is a governance problem. It is a social problem. It is an economy-wide problem. And I think the boiling rage that exists at this sense of injustice, that you are working 1-2 jobs, you are scared to go to the doctor because you don't think that you'll be even able to afford a blood test, that you're working tirelessly and you're not even making $8-9 an hour in a lot of places in this country. I think that is what we consistently see. And then on top of it, everything feels increasingly like a scam. That not only are grocery prices going up, but it's like everything has a fee and a surcharge. And I think that anger is put out at government. It is put out at a lot of different areas. And in terms of efficiency, our government can be tremendously efficient for the wealthy, but inefficient at times in delivering things for working people. That is not the same thing as justifying cutting the very few things that people actually interface with, going after the post office, going after the VA, going after Medicaid and Medicare. Those are two entirely different propositions.
Would you like a president to go in and break some china and mess things up, even if you don't like the way this president is trying to do that?
I think when we talk about breaking things, messing things up, I mean, to the FAA, no. To the NIH, no. To our ability to contain Ebola before it gets on a plane and comes into the United States, no. I don't want someone being reckless with the most critical infrastructure. I don't want someone being reckless, abandoning experimental medical devices that are implanted in everyday Americans who have no other recourse because their disease is so far progressed. I actually don't want someone taking a wrecking ball to someone's chemotherapy to just see what happens. Now, I do think that we can examine certain things like Medicare Advantage that I think is a scam, that in the name of so-called efficiency, ironically enough, we have handed over huge amounts of healthcare disbursements to private insurers who are pocketing it and giving less coverage to the people who receive this than ever before. Sure, yeah, let's go after that. But I don't think we just destroy everything that we have worked so hard for as a country to become innovative, to become just, to have some of the only lifelines that people have in this country to a roof over their head or food in their children's stomach. No, I don't think that we gamble with that.
Representative Ocasio-Cortez, thanks so much for coming by.
Of course. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.